I'm Tyler, 29 years old. Thanksgiving has always felt like a strange obligation for my family, a performance we all put on while secretly counting the minutes until we could escape. But this year, the tension was palpable, almost biting. The last few years had been rough for me, quiet even. I lost my job in the layoffs, downsized to a smaller apartment, and took on contract work just to stay afloat. Meanwhile, my younger sister Kayla was being celebrated like a prodigy. She'd landed a public relations gig at some big tech firm and curated a picture-perfect life on Instagram. My parents practically worshipped her, accepting it all as absolute truth. What I didn't expect was for them to be so openly dismissive of me. When I arrived at their house this year, something immediately felt off. The porch light was dim, and it took a full minute for anyone to answer the door. My mom finally opened it, wine glass in hand, sporting one of those overly festive sweaters she probably bought just for holiday photos. "Oh, you came," she said, blinking as if my presence was unexpected. No hug, no smile, just those three flat words, an obvious afterthought. I stepped inside, carrying the pie I'd baked, but she barely glanced at it, muttering, "There's already dessert." I walked into the dining room and froze. The table was set for 10, but only 9 chairs were occupied. One spot remained by the window where the light barely reached, but there was no place setting, just an empty space. I waited for someone to acknowledge me, but no one did. My sister waved from across the room, all bubbly and loud, her fiancé already engrossed in conversation with my uncle. I awkwardly set the pie on the counter and retreated. To the living room alone, dinner was called an hour later. Everyone filed in, laughter echoing, plates clinking. I lingered at the back, unsure where to sit. Eventually, I just pulled a stool from the bar and rolled it up to the end of the table. No one objected. They simply let it happen. Halfway through dinner, the wine was flowing a little too freely, and that's when it began. My mom stood up, glass raised, calling for attention. "I just want to say how incredibly proud I am this year," she announced, her voice already thick with wine and self-importance. "There's truly nothing more meaningful than watching your child thrive. So let's toast to the only child who genuinely made us proud." For a split second, the world seemed to stop. The air in the room tightened, like a tightening knot. Forks paused mid-air. Then, every head turned to Kayla, and they applauded. They clapped as if this were a rehearsed play, and they all knew their cues. My sister glowed, beaming as if she'd just won an Oscar. My mom smiled at her like she was royalty, and my aunt even whispered, "She really is the jewel of this family." My hands were ice cold. I hadn't touched. My food, cornbread stuffing, mashed potatoes, turkey, didn't want any of it. Something inside me fractured. But it wasn't a sudden break. It was quieter, more deliberate. I pushed back the stool, stood up, and the scrape of metal against wood drew a few glances. I looked down the table, my heart pounding in my chest. "Thanks for finally saying it out loud," I managed. That's when my dad, who had been mostly silent all night, set his glass down with a sharp clink and said, "Wait, tell them what you did." I froze. Everyone turned. My mom's smile faltered. Kayla looked bewildered. "Dad, what are you talking about?" Kayla asked, her voice syrupy sweet. My dad leaned back in his chair, staring at Minot angrily, just waiting. In that moment, I felt every eye fix on me, as if I were holding a live grenade. I hadn't planned for the night to escalate like this. I just wanted to eat, maybe force a few polite words, then go home and drown my sorrows in leftover pie. But apparently, that wasn't an option, not after what I had done, and not after what they were about. To learn, I hadn't told anyone in the family yet, not even my dad. I thought he didn't know, but clearly he did, and now he was forcing my hand. I glanced at him. He gave the slightest nod, the kind only a father could give, a mix of encouragement and permission. I turned to the room, my throat tight. My sister stared at me as if I was about to ruin her big moment. So I took a breath, looked at the table full of people who had just applauded my humiliation, and said, "All right, you want to?" "No, fine." I looked down at my hands for a moment. They were shaking, not with fear, but with something heavier. Years of silence and swallowed pride rose to the surface like a bitter taste. I took another breath, leveled my gaze across the table, and said, You all want to toast to Kayla. Fine, but maybe toast to me first, because I'm the reason she even got that job." The room went absolutely silent. You could hear the ceiling fan hum. Kayla scoffed. "What are you talking about?" I smiled, not because I found it funny, but because I couldn't believe I was finally saying it. "Your company had a hiring freeze. They weren't accepting any more applicants. So when you begged me to review your resume, I didn't just fix your grammar. I sent it to someone I knew in HR, someone who owed me a favor. I pulled strings, called in a personal reference, and they made an exception. That's how you got the interview. Not because you were better, but because I handed you the opportunity." My mom narrowed her eyes. "That's not true. Kayla had plenty of qualifications. She majored in art history and couldn't explain what PR stood for in her cover letter." I cut in, my voice steady. "You think they just plucked her resume from a pile and said, 'Let's give this random person a chance during a hiring freeze'? No, I gave it to someone I mentored 2 years ago, at the same company you all act like I've never been connected to." My sister's face went pale. Her fiancé leaned back, as if watching a drama unfold. My uncle shifted awkwardly in his seat, chewing slower. No one clapped now. My dad remained silent, just watching. Kayla spoke, quieter now. You never told me that, yeah," I said, shrugging, "because I didn't need the credit. I thought maybe, for once, I could just do the right thing without making it a competition." My mom's lip curled. "So what? You want a medal for that? You're bitter because we recognized your sister." "No," I replied calmly. "I'm bitter because you've never once even seen me. I could feel it bubbling out now, years of pent-up emotion. You remember when I won that coding competition in high school? National level, got flown out to DC? You told everyone it was cute that I was good with computers. Kayla got a participation award in middle school, and you threw her a pizza party. When I graduated college a year early with honors, you asked if I was sure the ceremony was worth attending. But when Kayla finished a 6-week online course and posted it to Instagram, you printed the certificate and framed it." I paused. The words came easier now, but each one still stung on the way out. "When I helped you refinance the house after Dad's accident, you said, 'You're so good with numbers,' like I was a calculator. I saved you thousands. Did you ever say thank you?" My mom crossed her arms, her face hardening. "You always make everything about yourself." I laughed bitterly. "No, you just make sure everything isn't about me. Big difference." Kayla looked down, then back up. "I didn't ask for this to happen. I didn't tell them to toast to me. No," I said, "but you soaked it in like you earned it. You let it happen. You always do." The room remained utterly silent. "You really want me to tell them everything?" He nodded once. "They should know." I glanced around the table again. "All right," I said, quieter this time. "This is the last Thanksgiving I'll ever spend here. And before I go, I want you all to understand why." My aunt opened her mouth as if to interject, but my dad cut in, let him speak. I looked at my mother. "Do you remember a few months ago when you got that letter from the IRS about a pending lien on the house? And then a week later, it magically resolved itself, and you got a notice saying the case was closed. You said it was a clerical error, that God must have been looking out for you." She blinked, then frowned. "That was me," I said. I paid it off quietly because I didn't want Dad to lose the house over something that wasn't even his fault. You didn't even ask questions. You just assumed the universe loved you. Kayla's eyes widened. "Wait, that lien was real?" "Yeah," I said, "and I used the last of my savings to clean it up." There was a long silence, and then my mom spoke again, her voice suddenly sharper. "If you had that kind of money, why didn't you help out when Kayla needed her car repaired last month?" I stared at her, stunned. That was the moment I realized. It wasn't that they didn't understand, it was that they didn't care. Kayla needed a car that trumped a potential foreclosure. "I had nothing left," I said. "I used it all for you." My dad leaned forward and finally spoke again. "Tyler's the one who bailed us out, not some miracle. He sacrificed quietly, and I let him. I was too proud to admit we needed help, and he never rubbed it in, until now." My mom just shook her head and stood up, muttering something about needing air. Kayla followed her out of the room, looking dazed. And then it was just me, my dad, and a room full of people who suddenly didn't know where to look. He stood up, walked over, and put a hand on my shoulder. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I should have stepped in sooner." I nodded but didn't speak. The emotion was building too fast now. My legs were already moving toward the door. I grabbed my coat from the hallway and stepped outside into the cold November air. Just as I reached the sidewalk, I heard the door creak open behind me and someone call my name. I turned. It was Kayla. Her face was pale, her hands shaking, and then she said something I never expected. "Tyler, wait. Before you go, there's something I need to admit." I stood there, halfway between the porch and the street, feeling the cold sink. Through my jacket and into my bones, the kind of chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Kayla's voice cracked, just enough for me to realize this wasn't some half-hearted apology. She was nervous, genuinely nervous. I turned slowly. "What do you need to admit?" She didn't come down the steps right away. She just gripped the frame of the front door, as if letting go would make her fall. Her eyes flicked toward the living room, where everyone else still sat, awkward, silent, stunned. Then she looked back at me. "I knew," she said. Those two words hit harder than I expected. "I knew about the job," she went on. "Not at first, but after I got the offer, I overheard a call between your friend in HR and her manager. They mentioned your name. I didn't say anything because I wanted to believe I earned it. I didn't say anything, just kept staring. I could feel something shifting in my chestnut rage. Not exactly, more like exhaustion soaked in disbelief. Kayla stepped. Down the first stair, I told myself it didn't matter, like the work was mine after I got it. But then Mom started acting like I was the golden child, and I didn't stop her. I let her believe I did it all on my own. I gave a bitter laugh. "You didn't just let her, you soaked it up like sunshine. You let her act like I was the failure and you were the one who made it." "I know," she said quietly. "I'm not proud of it." I shook my head, trying to gather my thoughts. "You could have said something, any time. Any of the 20 times she threw me under the bus just to praise you." Kayla came down one more step. "I was afraid that if I told them the truth, they'd just stop seeing me as special." "Welcome to my entire childhood," I shot back, a little sharper than I intended. She flinched, and for once, I saw something raw behind her carefully curated smiles and social media filters. It wasn't guilt, exactly. It was regret, and maybe something even deeper shame. "I'm sorry," she said. "I really am, but that's not all." I frowned. "What else?" She hesitated, as if weighing whether or not to say it. Then finally, she stepped all the way down to the path and walked up to me, hands buried in her sleeves. "Last year, when Dad got hurt and you offered to help with the refinancing, Mom told me not to let you." I blinked. "What?" She said it. "Would be a mistake to let you take over anything, that you'd just use it to hold something over us. So when you offered to help, she asked me to talk you out of it." I remembered that conversation, how Kayla had said, "Maybe you should just let them handle it. You've got enough going on." I thought she was just trying to be considerate. Turns out, it was more like manipulation dressed in concern. "I didn't want to," she added quickly, "but she pushed. And honestly, I didn't think you'd actually go through with it, but I did," I said, my voice low. "I went through with it. I spent everything I had." "I know," she said, "and it's eating me alive." We stood there in silence for a moment. I could hear laughter again through the window, nervous, forced. Maybe someone had made a bad joke to cut the tension. Probably my uncle, who always treated conflict like a sitcom. I stared at Kayla. I saw the girl I'd grown up with, the one who used to sneak into my room when she was scared of the dark, the one who used to call me her hero when we were kids. And now I saw the woman who stood by while our mom erased me. One Thanksgiving at a time. I just ... "I needed you to know," she whispered, "that I'm not proud of who I've become around them." I nodded slowly. "Thanks, but knowing it doesn't change anything." "I figured," she said, looking down. I turned to go, but then her voice came again, small, almost like a child's. "There's one more thing." I stopped. She looked up, lips trembling. "I think Mom is trying to sell the house." I turned back. "What?" "She's been talking to a realtor behind Dad's back. She wants to downsize, says it's too much to maintain, but that's not why." "Then why?" "She wants the cash, and she said if she sells it before the new year, She doesn't have to list Dad on the paperwork because the deed's still in her name. She's planning to sell it and move in with Aunt Linda. Dad doesn't even know. I felt like the wind had been knocked out of me. She said he'll be fine in a condo, Kayla added, but she didn't mention giving him a choice. My hands clenched into fists. She was going to blindside him. Kayla nodded. She told me not to say anything, but after tonight, I just couldn't keep it quiet anymore. The front door opened again, and we both turned. It was my dad. He stood on the porch, silent. For a moment, then said, "You should both come back inside. There's something I want to say to everyone." Kayla looked at me, unsure, and I had no idea what he was about to do, but something told me it was going to be big. I didn't move at first. The front door was open, my dad standing there like a shadow cutting across the porch light. But my legs stayed rooted to the pavement. Part of me wanted to keep walking, to let them all sit in the wreckage of their own making. But then I glanced at Kayla. Her expression wasn't defensive or smug, or even expectant. It was the kind of look that said, "This is going to hurt, but I'll stand here with you anyway." So I followed my dad back inside. The dining room had gone eerily quiet. Conversations had died off, the laughter replaced by the thick, awkward silence of people trying to pretend they hadn't just witnessed a family implosion. My mom sat at the head of the table, glass in hand again, looking irritated more than anything, not guilty, not reflective, just annoyed. My aunt and uncle were whispering about something between sips of wine. Kayla and I stepped into the room like unwanted guests crashing a party, which ironically described most of my holidays since I turned 21. My dad didn't sit. He stood at the center of the table, looking everyone in the eye before finally speaking. "I've made a lot of mistakes as a father," he began, "more than I probably even realize. But the biggest one was letting this family pretend that being loud meant being right. That silence was guilt, that the one who doesn't ask for attention doesn't need it." He looked at me. "I've stood by and watched as Tyler's been treated like a ghost. Like his accomplishments were somehow less important because he didn't post about them or wrap them in a bow, and I didn't speak up. I let my silence become permission." My mother rolled her eyes and muttered, "Oh, come on, ... double quotes. "No, you come on," my dad snapped, his voice rising for the first time in years. "You stood there and made a toast to only one of our kids. You knew what you were doing. Don't act like it was innocent." She went quiet, her lips thinning. He continued, his voice calmer now. "When Tyler was a teenager, he used to stay up late helping me figure out our taxes because I couldn't afford an accountant. When I threw out my back and couldn't work, he took side jobs to help with groceries. He was 18. And when the IRS almost took our house, he paid it off without fanfare, without asking for thanks, because that's the kind of man he is." A ripple of murmurs moved through the table. A few people looked genuinely shocked. And while we were busy clapping for Kayla, my dad said, glancing at her briefly, "We were ignoring the person who was holding this family together behind the scenes." Kayla looked down, ashamed. And now my dad turned to my mom again. "Out you're trying to sell the house behind my back after everything he did to save it?" My mother's head snapped up. "Who told you that?" He didn't answer. He didn't need to. The silence was answer enough. She scoffed, rising from her chair. "It's not like I was just going to take the money and run. I was planning to help you. I've been managing this house for years while you've been working yourself into the ground. You were going to move in with Linda," he said, his voice shaking. "And leave me where? In a condo you didn't even discuss with me. You made that decision for both of us. You don't understand how exhausting it is." "No," he interrupted. You don't understand what it means to build something and watch your own family try to tear it down from the inside." My mom folded her arms, her face flushed with anger, but she didn't speak. My dad turned back to me. "Tyler, I know I can't undo all the times I didn't defend you, but I see you now. I really do." Something caught in my throat, and for the first time that night, I didn't know what to say. I just nodded. That was enough. But he wasn't done. "I'm making this right," he said, and pulled an envelope from his coat pocket. "I've been talking to our lawyer. I added you to the deed." Gasps came from around the table. "Starting next month," he said, "you and I will co-own the house. If something happens to me, the mortgage is yours, but it'll be fully paid off. It's not about the money. It's about the fact that you deserve to have something to show for everything you've sacrificed. And no one, no one is going to take that away from you. My mom stood up, her voice trembling with rage. You can't do that without my... Actually, he said, holding up another sheet of paper, I can, because in the original refinancing, Did you sign your rights over to me as sole trustee? You just didn't read the fine print. And since then, I've had full control. So yes, I can. The color drained from her face. Now sit down, he said coldly. You've said enough for one night. And she did, not because she agreed, but because for the first time ever, she realized she was out of moves. Kayla looked at me with a mix of guilt and something else, admiration. Maybe, or like she'd just realized the quiet brother she'd taken for granted had been playing for chess while the rest of them were still learning checkers. I didn't say much. After that, I didn't need to. The silence around the table said it all. Eventually, people started to leave quietly, no goodbyes, no hugs, just the sound of coats rustling and doors opening and closing. Kayla stayed back to help clear the dishes. My dad poured himself a fresh glass of wine and offered me one. I took it. As we stood in the kitchen, Kayla approached me with 2 cups of coffee and handed me one. I don't know if I can fix all of this, she said, but I want to try. And not because I feel guilty, okay? Maybe a little because of that, but mostly because I miss having a real brother, not just the idea of one. I raised my coffee. We'll see, she smiled sadly. Fair, we didn't hug. We weren't there yet. But we weren't on opposite sides of the table anymore either. As I left that night, I looked back at the house. It still looked the same, weathered, familiar, full of history. But something had shifted. For the first time, it felt like mine. Not because I was on the deed, but because I had finally reclaimed the space they tried to push me out of, the place I'd quietly protected for years. The next day, I got a text from my cousin, whom I hadn't spoken to all night. It read, "We were all wrong about you. I'm sorry." I stared at it for a minute before replying, "Don't be sorry, just be better." And with that, I put my phone away, made myself breakfast in my tiny apartment, and felt something I hadn't felt in a long time. Not pride, not vindication, peace. The kind that comes when you stop waiting for an apology and start writing your own ending. Let me know your thoughts in the comments below.